Good afternoon. The learning community has been never seen class in a panel which is not taken from very long distance. Once they take time, they give you very little, and they cover you, give you very little time for you to speak, and then they will want you to talk. They've done most of the talking. So that's a learning community in a serious way. Okay, with the introduce with, let's talk about what I am. Now I talk about what we do. I represent Excelsoft, which is an organization that provides technology solutions for learning and training. What does it mean? We have a platform which is a learning platform. We provide digital content and we provide mobile solutions. You see people using a lot of devices, tablets, and bring your own devices. So, okay. We need a solution which can cut across multiple platforms, agnostic to the type of device that you use. We provide that as a solution. In a nutshell, in case any of you have requirements around learning, you know who to contact now. It is not meant to be a sales pitch, but it has come to the sales pitch. Why I want to say the context of what Excelsoft is that, given the course of the presentation, we're going to talk about the learnings, the journey that we've taken over 13-year period. And what we're going to present is something that we've done during the journey, the interaction with people, from the learning people, from the CEOs, from the top management. So this is going to be, the content is set largely from the perspective of where we've learned, what we've learned. But let's take a real scenario. All of us have got a car breakdown somewhere in life. All of us have got admission in hospital because of emergencies that we could have planned for. Now let's look at another scenario. This is another scenario where there are indications that have come in life. For example, your car kept getting problems, or your body kept saying something not right. You kept ignoring the indications, you kept ignoring the symptoms. And what happens after that? You don't get the data, you don't analyze the data. As a result, you have a situation where you are. There are two situations which result in the same, but one could have been handled better, but you didn't because you didn't analyze. That's the importance of analytics. Now let's take this real life scenario into something for learning. As a learning head, as a CLO, as a people of the learning department, there are data points which keep getting thrown at you. One, you don't capture enough data, that's possibility. One, you do not analyze the data enough, that's the second possibility. As a result, you might have made a lot of decisions which are not correct, leaving you in a situation like this. You don't want it in a state like this because you don't see the data coming in. You don't look for data which is available, but you don't register the data and store the data. So the context of the presentation is going to be this. Analytics is a very, very key thing which is going to provide data for you to look at how learning is going to progress as a division and how it falls into the overall scheme of things for an organization. Let's talk a little about the current scenario of learning. I'm sure there are a lot of organizations here who've progressed. This is not to say that you guys are doing, not doing, but just a scenario, a sample scenario of what possibly is the current scenario. If you engage the best people to train your employees, you've got a state-of-the-art learning management system, and you've got a good assessment system to assess your people. You invest heavily in creating content, and you also creating content from, or accessing content from external people as well. Start at the top institutes to send your people for training. You did everything right in theory. You think this is the best that you can do. But is that right? Is that good enough? Is this what you should be doing? We don't know. We're not measuring it, we really don't know this is what you should be doing. And here are some points. Probably many of you will have data, probably many of you are doing this as well. But I'll just give you some points which we've come across in terms of what people say. What's the ROI that the organization gets? Everybody talked about ROI. So what's the ROI that the organization gets because of these training programs? Does a person perform better after attending the training program? Which is better, a classroom training, e-learning, or a blended learning? There's a session on blended learning later in the day. Probably I'll throw you more ideas, but that's a point. And what correlates best on the job performance? Ultimately, what does a person want? What does the CEO want? If I were a CEO, I'd like to know. For someone to perform best at the job, what is the highest correlation? Is it a particular training program? Is it a particular assessment? Is it soft skills? Is it one particular section in a learning program? Is it correlation high with the number of training programs attended? Because of no programs being attended. We don't know. We're not measuring enough. I'm sure many of you are. I'm saying these are points which, as a CEO, one would like to know. How do you find the answer? Learning analytics. Analytics provides insights. How get the data, how we contribute to the overall learning objectives and overall objectives of the organization. Learning as a division does not exist alone in many of the organizations. It's part of the overall organization goal, and the CEO, it folds into the overall scheme of things of the organization. It's not to say that there are no tools available right now. There are tools. You have a good learning management, it generates data. There are data coming out of it. You have multiple systems, which could be a HR system, your performance system. You have multiple systems which expresses this. They are also generating data. You have multiple systems existing in different organizations, each of them generating data. But are they talking together? Are they able to see a system or a pattern where one correlates with another one and you're able to see more aligned with the organization? We are working in a world where it's very interrelated and very interconnected. It's important to have systems which talk to each other, which correlate to each other. Even if they look very disconnected at this point in time, but overall you put everything in the scheme of things. You might have very good correlation, able to get data, which is very good. Learning analytics is what will probably help you get there. Learning happens everywhere. Some of us believe, or I used to believe till I joined the learning organization, that learning happens only in a formal classroom, in a formal learning instruction. When somebody tells me this is learning, I thought learning happens in there. And what percentage of that happens in learning? Not much. Learning happens on the job, learning happens everywhere. Learning happens even now. I'm talking about, I'm not a learning expert, but I'm speaking in front of a learning audience, and I'm learning something from the top. You people are just before lunch, nodding as sincerely listening to me, and you're learning something how to do that, right? So, despite the same scenario before lunch, you're still doing that. So learning happens everywhere. Learning by listening, learning by reading, learning by discussing, learning on forums. This is learning which happens round the clock. Are these learning measured? The fundamental disconnect is that most of the learning is not measured. All experience matter. For example, we just said learning happens everywhere. You see your own people learn. In real life scenario, we learn. Let's take a case of, the fundamental, there is a learning management platform. There are people who take a particular learning program. There is a person, there are two people who have taken a particular course. The constraint of a learning system is that it gets data from that particular content, from that particular ecosystem. It doesn't know or doesn't recognize or collect data beyond that particular platform. So if there are two people who take a particular course, one of them, both the guys have answered it correctly. One person has gone through the course, answered it. The second one has looked at it, but after that, to learn more, he or she has gone to multiple platforms. Whether it's YouTube, you put it on LinkedIn, check with the speaker on Facebook, spoken to internal people on email, his colleagues, and then got the right answer. These are two sets of people. At this point in time, what are we doing? We're looking just the right people. Both the people have taken the right decisions, let's take both of them. But if you were to get data more, if you were to analyze the way these guys traverse the path, you might take a decision which is slightly different compared to which is looking at the outcome. Learning is not just knowledge assimilation, it's much more than that. Now let's look at another one. There is a game where you are thinking a scenario which is very close to reality. What happens? There are two people who are taking the same test. They've learned a particular course and they're going through the motions of the assessment and the course. One does it exactly what you're supposed to do, does the results. The other one has made a few mistakes, but you're not recording it. Both answer correctly. But the paths they've taken is, one has gone straight, he's understood it correctly, and taken us all on that. The second one has gone through the motions, is not put the correct, one lab, looked at it, tried to make a mistake, and then corrected it. One is job ready, the other person is probably not job ready. In the current scenario, what are we doing? We're taking both the people as job ready. Whereas, if you're able to get more data, if you're able to record more data which is coming out of the platform, make data coming out of all the platforms that are there, then the decisions could be very different compared to what you're doing now. That's broadly the point what we're saying. Learning should not be restricted to the classroom, learning should not be restricted to learning platforms, but the experience that one does, or one comes out of learning, that should be recorded in a place, and decisions should be taken based on that. This is the framework that we've used when we've gone and talked about learning analytics. We have to collect and consolidate all the data. The data comes from multiple places. As we said, there are multiple platforms there, data gets collected. You have to collect and consolidate in a learning repository. When you do that, you enrich the data. You get data in multiple forms. You can't compare apples to oranges. So you have to use tools to bring all the data to a particular level playing field. That's what you do by enrich the data, which means you're able to compare data right now of what you've collected. visualize. For example, if the CEO says, or the sales head says, I want to see how a person has done in a particular month, in a year, in a quarter, that's what you see data in terms of dashboard. Those are data which you're looking for and you see that. But more interestingly, if you explore further and liberate the data, and if you have a lot of data, the data starts posing questions to you. You will see patterns which you never saw before. You will look at data very differently. The data starts asking questions saying, hey, this is a thread. This is a pattern which you probably ignored. This is something which is different and which is something which would give it a different meaning altogether. Those are things that probably not happen at this point in time. Finally, there's a lot of data, decision making. You get the data, you get the patterns, you get correlations between unseen things. We never thought there'd be a correlation between two different things, but you see a correlation here as well. Decision making of the organization. You might take a call depending upon what you see as the data and find the decision making from the on going to take. Learning analytics, in addition to providing data, if this is done over a period of time with a lot of data, then it starts getting predictive. You can predict performance, and that's really interesting. But for that to happen, you need to have a lot more data. The data points have to be very, very strong over a period of time. The second option is corporates will collaborate with each other. Similar sized corporates would collaborate in terms of what data they generate. If that happens, you will have more meaningful data, which could result in predictive analysis that helps everybody in terms of giving results to the organization. However, all this is sophisticated tools and technologies are still available. You have to fundamentally analyze every data that comes your way. Completely analyze the data that comes your way. There are data points which could be different to different organizations. For example, if somebody is going through a learning assessment, a learning module where there are multiple parts which can have traversed, one person goes through the data, goes through the learning, and there are critical parts which diverge. He or she just follows what the instructions are and finishes up the program. But the second person could have tried out different things, made mistakes and learned from that. Both solve the problems. But how do companies look at both of them? A company which is very strong in process orientation would say, I'll take the first person, obey the instructions, does it well. A startup, for example, wouldn't want that person. It wants people who can try out different things, make mistakes, and ultimately take decisions. Those are, which means the same data available, the same results are there, but people react very differently, and decision making is very, very different. That's the core of what we're saying in terms of learning analytics. Put the information in contact, take decisions that are measured, that's relevant to the organization. Thank you.